Welcome to Evidently Speaking by Project Evident. I'm Sarah Troia. Project Evident harnesses the power of data, evidence, and technology for greater impact. Evidently Speaking explores the stories core to this mission and highlights the insights and successes of nonprofit practitioners and our partners. Project Evident worked with the technology and program leads of 13 nonprofits to co-create a practical and actionable Equitable AI Adoption Framework. The episodes in this series each examine one component of the framework and feature the experience and expertise of our partners. This episode's topic is Monitor and Assess. The Equitable AI Adoption Framework breaks monitor and assess into two key areas: assessing model output quality and ongoing monitoring. Now, for those of you who are thinking, where's learning? Monitor and assess? I mean, they typically hang out with learning, right? I mean, they hang out so often, we have a nickname for them, Mel. Well, we do talk about learning, just in a separate episode. If you're interested in learning, please listen to the episode called Designing for Outcomes. Think of your nonprofit's AI implementation like a vegetable garden. Assessing? That's really testing how much the garden is producing and the overall nutritiousness of the vegetables. These are like your program outputs and outcomes. Monitoring is regularly walking through the garden to see whether pests or weeds are creeping in. And this is really important with AI, because I gotta tell you, there are a lot of pests and weeds when it comes to AI. But we'll get to that later. To start, all the gardeners need to work together to create a clear and shared picture of what that vegetable patch should look like when it is flourishing.
Yeah, again, it's multiple tables, multiple rooms.
This is Scott Del Rossi, Vice President of College and Career Success at College Possible. College Possible's mission is to expand college access and college success at scale by pairing great coaches with smart systems so students persist, graduate, and launch their careers. Scott and his team at College Possible use AI tools to supplement their coaching. They use their historical data and institutional knowledge to provide better suggestions for students to get to and through college quicker. They also use these AI tools to handle a lot of the administrative tasks that their coaches were spending time on. That way, coaches have more time for quality conversations with the students that they're advising. Scott talks about the partnership between program staff, the data and evaluation team, and the IT team in defining quality outputs.
We benefited from having a very clear theory of change and logic model. So it's been really easy to have conversations kind of internally on our end around where we think these tools are benefiting the program, whether it be the improving our outcomes or improving the efficiency of some of our activities. And that's been a conversation mostly between right now the program and the data and evaluation teams. But certainly IT has been a part of that because they're the ones architecting the system and how we're tracking things. So it's mostly been kind of those broad set of stakeholders. And I wish I could say it's like a very formal process, step by step. It hasn't, but I think we've benefited from having kind of a lot of organic conversations around this as a topic. Just understanding what you're trying to get out of it, because it can be really easy to get caught up with the fancy new tool and really get you to a place where you're creating tools for a problem that doesn't exist.
Defining model quality outputs is where all AI projects start.
It's an interesting problem to solve, right? How do you define success? How do you operationalize that? And how do you measure it in a manageable way? My background is research, so that's the bread and butter of what a researcher does.
That's Sarah Gripshover, Director of Research at the Project for Educational Research That Scales, or PERTS. PERTS is an organization that works to provide resources for educators to create the conditions for young people to feel like they belong in school, such as providing coursework that feels meaningful and relevant to their lives, and that helps students feel like adults believe in them. Sarah's organization, PERTS, is earlier in their AI journey. They're currently developing and beta testing an AI tool to recommend practices for educators to use in their classroom. So, once you've agreed on what good looks like, how do you assess AI model outputs for quality?
I think we have two kind of criteria. The first is kind of users, right? So the output should be what users want and it should be helpful to them. And then the second is it should be offering sound advice. So this advice that it's giving shouldn't, for example, misalign with everything we know from research literature. It shouldn't be kind of pontificating on something that, isn't well informed. So those are the two kind of factors that we look at. Our research fellow who's leading this work, she started by collecting questions from users, also from team members who know our users really well. And she just put them into the chatbot and made a spreadsheet of all the questions and all the answers. Right. And so then I reviewed all of that. As the director of research, I have a pretty good perspective on, what a quality response is from that point of view. And our program team also reviewed all the answers. And we had a couple of meetings, we met and talked about them. And it was a really cool process because, sometimes we would look at an answer that isn't quite right. And then we'd go back to our knowledge base and we'd realize, okay, well, this chatbot's answer isn't quite right. But actually, the way it's worded here, I can see how it thought that. And so we would realize, okay, actually, our documentation needs to be updated. This needs to be clarified in our documentation. And then other times, this is well explained in our documentation, but the chatbot isn't really understanding the question. A lot of our wrong answers were things like, a user would say, well, what should I do? And it was just really ambiguous what they meant. What should I do in this case? And then the chatbot would give generic language from our website, instead of kind of saying well, what are you trying to do? So in that case, she would go in and kind of program intents. Intents is just, it's basically you go in and you say when a user says X, they really mean Y. So answer this underlying question, right? So it's things like that. So it's a kind of a dance between updating our documentation and updating the chatbot's behavior. But now she's in the process of retraining the chatbot on the updated documentation. We're going to run those 20 questions again, and we're going to see, we're going to go through them again manually and just look at how good the responses are.
This iterative process of assessment, this is essential to establishing if your AI model is delivering accurate and high-quality responses or predictions. This is Laila Brenner. She's the head of philanthropy at TalkingPoints. TalkingPoints is what we would call an AI native organization. They were founded with AI at the core of their program model. So they use technology and AI to help schools and families build meaningful partnerships that help children thrive. For Laila and her team, it was important to collaborate with both internal and external stakeholders to make sure the AI tools were producing outputs that met their benchmarks, even if that meant trying to break the tools in the process.
We built a tool called Message Mentor, which helps teachers write research-based, asset-framed, effective messages to families. It helps them start difficult conversations, convey information in really understandable and simple ways. And it's driven by generative AI. So a teacher can write a message, click a button, they can even just put in a keyword, a message will be generated for them. And as we were building this, we really tried to break it. What could we put in that would give us a bad output? So we knew what the parameters were and what the dangers that we could be facing. We tested it with a lot of teachers. We did a lot of user research and we said, what would you put into this model? What comes out? Would you accept this output? How would you change this? And then we would go and we would tweak the training. He'd say, don't say this. Make sure it's at a certain literacy level. Always avoid this term. Don't, do X, Y, Z. So really making sure that it was our internal product R&D team who were testing it, but then we're testing that with real teachers and then understanding how was that received by families? Is this the message that makes you want to write back, that makes you want to engage, that makes you do the activity with your child, that makes you really feel good about the partnership with your school?
Both Sarah and Laila have shared the amount of assessment it takes to truly ensure that your model is hitting your output quality benchmarks. And it's tempting to think that once you've achieved a high quality output, Well, like you could just walk away. But in reality, monitoring, it's just as important as assessment. Laila of Talking Points, she highlights why monitoring is important.
You cannot build anything with AI, monitor it for a short period of time, and think that it's going to work forever because models are changing. They're being trained with new data all the time behind the scenes that we don't always know about, particularly when you're using these commercial large language models. So it's really important that you are building monitoring and assessment into your model in perpetuity. It's not a one and done activity. It's something that you have to do consistently and on a regular basis.
It's not just that the large language models themselves are in constant evolution. It's the tools that nonprofits are building on top of those models. Those tools are changing as well. This is Scott from College Possible.
And I think we have had instances of model drift, um, but mostly generated from our service population, our students.
Model drift is like when your car's alignment gradually shifts over time. It still runs, it just doesn't steer quite as accurately as it used to. So with AI, this happens when real world data that the model is encountering, it's like the bumps in the road. The model starts to behave differently from what it was originally trained on. And that means your predictions are less reliable, less likely to hit those output quality benchmarks, even though the model itself hasn't changed. Back to Scott.
We're able to see all the questions that students ask of the chatbot and our tools. And we've been getting a lot of questions around careers and like how to, like what careers are out there for me? How does college tie to that? How do I, in college get ready for my next career? And that's just not traditionally curriculum that we've had. And so we've shut the bot off from answering those questions for the most part. But it's becoming kind of a common enough question or inquiry from students, either as part of that system or just through our surveys, that we are trying to evaluate kind of the role that might play in our program, but we've not gotten to a kind of final decision yet on that. When we think about ongoing monitoring evaluation, it's something that we have always routinely done at College Possible. So it's really been about how do we add these new systems, checkpoints, or stakeholders to the system. And so just from a programmatic end, we have a CRM that we're able to monitor like daily, weekly, monthly activities, college academics, college enrollment, et cetera. We're looking at those regularly on the kind of administrative end. And we're going through kind of data evaluation conversations internally. We're doing that with sites. And so that's the system that we then integrated kind of these other tools or evaluation points. And so the first is, especially because this is just where we are with launching a lot of new tools, it's just been a part of that like program implementation, product implementation cycle where we do a lot of like testing as we're designing and developing the tool. We're doing a lot of focus groups and surveys around that testing. We're then often piloting these tools before we launch it more broadly. And so that's all feedback that we take as part of whether or not this tool is being effective. Within that, we also then, once we launch the tool, we're tracking for engagement. So is the tool useful? And part of that is our students using the tool. And then the second part of that is, again, just getting ongoing feedback from the student, whether or not the tool is working. And then, of course, because we're introducing all these tools into our kind of overall logic model, we're still tracking and monitoring those outputs and outcomes to make sure that we're staying on track relative to previous year's benchmarks when we've not had these tools.
As we wrap this episode, remember that the process for nonprofits to monitor and assess, it isn't just like a one and done checklist. By building assessment and monitoring of AI tools into everyday practice, nonprofits don't just use AI, they shape it. They shape it into something that truly supports their mission and the people they serve. Thank you for listening to Evidently Speaking by Project Evident. I'm Sarah Troia. At Project Evident, we work to build trusting partnerships and expand access to tools so leaders have what they need to improve outcomes. We believe that when practitioners are equipped with actionable data and evidence, stronger and more meaningful outcomes for students and communities become a reality. To learn more about our mission and work, visit projectevident.org.